Maya Angelou. Even the stars look lonesome. A house can hurt. A home can heal. A house can hurt. A home can heal. My last marriage was made in heaven. The musical accompaniment was provided by Gabriel, and the angels were so happy that 10,000 of them danced on the head of a pin. It was the marriage to end all my marriages. My husband had dropped out of architecture school and become a builder. In fact, in Britain, where he had lived, he was called a master builder. We married in Los Angeles, where he bought and rebuilt old houses, then sold them at handsome profits. We then moved to Sonoma County, where he found more old houses to refurbish. He stored a genteel, polished look to old Victorians in modernized 1930s bungalows. After several years of rapturous married life, we moved to the Pacific Palisades, into a futuristic condo that thrust its living room out over a California canyon, with a daring and insouciance usually to be found only in a practiced drunk pretending sobriety. There, in that expensive and posh settlement, the foundation of my marriage began to collapse. Here, Maya Angelou introduces a few metaphors. She compares her marriage, and this is very intense as she talks about the foundations of her married life, and she talks about how a condo and a living room and all the physical characteristics of the place, and then she talks about how expensive and posh it was, but that place had foundation, but her marriage fell apart in spite of it all, began to collapse. So the foundation of all the materialistic things could not hold the marriage together. One of the metaphors she makes here is about a drunk pretending sobriety. But this type of daring and insouciance is only found in a practiced drunk pretending sobriety, because a practiced drunk would be somebody that had the ability to pretend he or she was sober because they've been drunk so many times. With all heart-sore lovers, I say, I don't know what went wrong, but I suspect it was the house. The living room was 2 stories high, and I put my large 3 by 5 foot paintings on the walls, and upon those vast reaches they diminished and began to look little better than enlarged color posters. I laid my Indian and Pakistani rugs on the floor over the beige wall-to-wall carpeting, and they drowned in the vastness of the living room, appearing little more than colorful table mats on a large boardroom table. Everything was built in: standard oven, microwave oven, grill, garbage disposal, compactor. There was nothing for my husband to do. Before, when our marriage had shown weaknesses, as all marriages do, I suppose, I would argue with my husband on his procrastination. Procrastination, always leaving things to be done later. Oh, let's not worry about it today. Let's worry about it tomorrow, next week, next month. Postponing things, constantly postponing things. Procrastination. And taking out the garbage, or his failure to separate the cans from the glass bottles, or his refusal to brush the Weber clean and empty the ashes. These, she's talking about mundane, routine problems that everybody has. But Alice, since the house did everything itself, I couldn't blame him for his inconsequential failures, and was forced to face up to our real problems. Floundering or not, We still had the ability to talk to each other. I asked what he thought was the matter, and he said, "It's this damn house. We're simple people, and it's too damn pretentious." So here we have the materialistic world interfering with their relationship. She's talking about how these details and little things that the husband could have done, the house did itself. So she didn't have anything to blame on him, and she didn't have any tasks for him to do, and this created a problem in their marriage. And he says it's the house, it's too pretentious, we're simple people. I did question if we were truly simple people. I was the first black female writer-producer at 20th Century Fox, a member of the Board of Trustees of the American Film Institute, and lecturer at universities around the world, from Yale to the University of Milan, Italy. He was a builder from London, a graduate of the London School of Economics, the first near-nude centerfold for Cosmopolitan magazine, and formerly husband of Germaine Greer. Our credentials, good and bad, hardly added up to our being simple people. So what she's trying to say is, even though underneath all the layers of those titles, they could probably feel very safe and put themselves on a pedestal, he still felt like he was a simple person, like they were simple people. We agreed that the house was separating us. He thought it was time to move back to Northern California, where the grass was greener and the air purer, and we could live simpler lives. I would write poetry, and he would build ordinary houses. He went on a quest to the Bay Area and found an Art Deco house in the hills of Oakland with a magnificent view of the Golden Gate Bridge. Here's an interesting fact that just happened. I'm going to use it to add to learning here, to the learning process. There's the word heels. Heels as in shoe heels, and there is the word hills. They're separated by one phoneme. And people will say, but what do you mean one phoneme? They're separated by two, there's two letters there. It's not about the amount of letters, it is about the sound they make. Heels and hills. That's E and I. Those are the phonemes that separate these two words. And often enough, it is easy to confuse them because they don't even exist in certain languages. Maybe the E sound exists, but not the other one, I, which is a phoneme not present in some languages, and it might sometimes sound to people that heels and hills are exactly the same pronunciation, because the phoneme is a very small fragment of a sound here that can go unnoticed. That's why practice is necessary. Hills, heels. This one is longer. Not only longer, but it's an E sound. Heels, hills. And the word I meant to say was hills here, not heels. But because these two words are separated by one phoneme only, it is something that can happen when you're reading, when you're talking, that you might confuse the two. As long as you know there are two different phonemes there. Heels, hills. And you can differentiate them. And practice makes perfect. Read out loud. Listen to your own voice saying the words. That really helps learning how to speak a foreign language. We agreed that the house was separating us. He thought it was time to move back to Northern California, where the grass was greener and the air purer, and we could live simpler lives. I would write poetry, and he would build ordinary houses. He went on a quest to the Bay Area and found an Art Deco house in the hills of Oakland with a magnificent view of the Golden Gate Bridge, that iconic orange reddish bridge in San Francisco, where a lot of people perhaps think of the beauty of the scenery, and others might look at it with a gloomy, very sad feeling of that's where people go to end their lives, and they're changing the architecture of that bridge. I just recently read an article about how they are actually changing it so that it makes it difficult for people to try and commit suicide there, to avoid that stigma of the bridge being associated with that. I'm not so sure if this has anything to do symbolically here with what the author is trying to say. It sounds like it is autobiographical. It is being told, the story is being told from the first person perspective, which could mean that this is autobiographical. In some instances, it could also mean that it's a fantastic, perhaps a figment of the author's imagination, that this character is telling the story was also a character created by the author. This is something to do research about on Maya Angelou and figure out if Even the Stars Look Lonesome was actually autobiographical or not. His happiness was contagious. Our marriage was back on track. We were rather eccentric, loving, unusual couple, determined to live life with flair and laughter. We bought the house on Castle Drive from a couple who had married a year before and had been busy bringing the house back to its original classical 3 pastel colors. I admit, it was a little disconcerting to find that the couple had divorced before they even moved into the house. But I decided that was their affair and was not necessarily a bad omen for us in our new home. My husband and I moved in. The beautiful floors welcomed my oriental rugs. In hanging my paintings, I had to adjust to some of the round corners, but I adjusted. My oversized sofas were primed to offer comfort to those who wanted to sit and look out over the garden and at the bay. There was a room that was a bar, and its circular windows opened into the kitchen, where there was no compactor, no garbage disposal, one oven, and a gas range. The piano sat in the corner of the spacious living room, and we set up handsome card tables in the bar so that we could entertain ourselves and our guests at bid and other parlor games. I thought, now is the way to live. This is the way to live. Within a month, I realized the house hated me. It was no consolation that it hated my husband as well. I want to make a pause here to talk about personification. Personification is a figure of speech used in literature. The house hated me. A house is an object, a thing. It's not a living being. So it cannot hate somebody. But here, the person telling the story, the omniscient narrator in a first person telling the story, is personifying the house, is making the house, giving the house abilities only pertaining to people. The house hated me.